there's just one rule. Put your phone in the other room and watch these movies. These are all really, really great movies. My favorite versus the best, I think, are two separate things. But when I say something is the best, that's keeping everybody else in mind. I'm giving you movies that you will like. You will like this movie, even if you have a hard time because it's old. It's fantastic. One of the major things I hate about so many modern movies is that the characters are so dull that anyone could speak the dialogue that they speak and you wouldn't know the difference. Hey, welcome to the Create Unknown, the home of Make Something Mean Something. I am Kevin Lieber. I'm flying solo. I'm your Unc-Slop Sherpa, here with some Unc-Slop recommendations. I have learned a great deal in the past couple of weeks as we've been talking about Unc-Slop as a general concept, and then specifically last week about movies as an art form. That, the question was posed last week if movies were becoming a zombie art, and the answers that I received from our listeners is yes and yes. I also spoke a little bit more with, got some more details about Weezer Good, who I mentioned on last week's podcast, who's in film school. I learned that he's in film school in LA. So, basically in Tinseltown itself, learning about the craft of filmmaking, and is one of the few students in the class who actually watches movies. So the fact that that little detail, adding that he was in LA, just made it that much more preposterous overall. I think that the people who are growing up in the environment of Hollywood, the place where movies are made, also still do not care about movies. Told me another story this week where he was talking to someone in his class and simply asked them to name their top 4. I don't know why 4 instead of 5, but top 4 favorite movies, and they could not answer him. So then he asked if they could just name 4 movies that they liked, and still could not answer him. So there's no way that I could exaggerate any more to you the fact that, at least through this little anecdote, this experience of this person in our Discord who's going to film school in Los Angeles, that there are people going to film school who cannot name 4 films that they like. I don't get it. However, I have offered up my services as the Unc-Slop Sherpa because there are those of you out there who would like some recommendations, who would like some guidance. I have continued, now Weezer Good in the Discord is sort of updating me frequently on the movies that he's watched, what he's liked, what he thought was okay, that sort of thing. He loved Taxi Driver, was surprised by Goodfellas. It was different than he thought it was going to be. But anyway, there's an ongoing back and forth and discussion now that's really fun for me, actually, to hear, from someone of the younger generation, what they think of these older movies. I won't even call them Unc-Slop because, that will be the designation overall for my recommendations. But I think it's important to clarify that these aren't just like the movies that I watched as a kid. So of course I think they're the best, like there was that years ago, there was a study that I read that basically whatever, for the average person, obviously there are exceptions, but for the average person, like whatever their favorite music was when they were 15 years old ends up being what they think the greatest music is for the rest of their life. So it informs their tastes sort of permanently. They get concretized at the age of 15 to think that, Pearl Jam is the greatest band of all time or whatever. This is not that. And the reason that you can know that this is not that is that I will be recommending movies all over the place from 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, up through the early 2000s. I'm not going past 2010 with the assumption that the people listening, are older than 10 years old and probably have seen or are familiar with movies from the last, 15 or so years. So that is all to say that although this is my Unc-Slop recommendations, this is really just movies overall. The other caveat, though, I will say is that there are a couple of black and white movies that I will recommend just to throw out there in case the majority of the movies that I mentioned you've already seen before, and maybe you haven't dabbled yet in the ancient days of film. But for the most part, I'm not going to throw out a bunch of things from, the 40s and the 50s and the 60s. Why? Because, well, I want to recommend movies that I think most people will really like. The last thing that I would want to do with a list like this is to recommend things that are considered classics or, like seminal works that have a high propensity to bore a modern viewer, especially someone who's not watched a whole bunch of movies. And now I'm going to tell them to watch Citizen Kane because they have to and they are bored by it. And now they're like, it sort of is justifying their predilection to think that like old movies are boring. Oh, I knew this was boring. This came up before we started before I started recording in our episode chat here on Discord. The Chin Collector mentioned not being in love with 2001: A Space Odyssey. And my reaction to that was, yeah, that's fair. Like that's totally a fair response. I don't there's no part of me that's going to get up on my high horse and say, "Oh, well, clearly you have no taste, dear sir." I totally get that. Like that movie is incredibly important for a lot of reasons in film history, but is it like the most exciting movie to recommend to somebody who is like just sort of garnering an interest in watching movies? Definitely not. Definitely not. So that movie is not on my list. Citizen Kane is also not on my list, even though it's a phenomenal movie and probably, if not the most important movie of all time, I would say top three for sure. A lot of that has to do with like editing technique and filming technique and uh, like things that you have to sort of start becoming a film nerd to like super appreciate. So that's not on my list. My list is things that I really would have a hard time thinking that you wouldn't like. Like I really tried to put movies here where in my envisioning of you sitting down watching this for the first time, I'm like, I have a hard time thinking that they're not going to like this. I think that almost everybody will like every movie that I have to recommend. I've also like loosely categorized them just to have some sort of sense to them. And I also want to say this is not like these are Kevin's favorite movies of all time. This is not a top 10 list. There are probably a lot of better movies that I have either forgotten to add or maybe I just think that they're like a little too niche to recommend to everyone in like this kind of one-sided conversation way. So if there are things that you're like, okay, you definitely missed that. What about that? Then yes, please leave that as a comment. Let me know what you think are some of the best movies to recommend to people just getting into it. But I did the best that I could to have like a nice range of things that I've seen. Oh, also there are no rom-coms on here. I'm not well versed in that genre. And there are also like probably a lot of I don't know. There are a handful of other genres that probably will not be represented on my list. So, but this is my list. These are movies that I think you would probably like. We'll start with the action genre. So within the action genre, the first movie, like this is, I think, the best action movie of all time. So it's the one that I'd recommend right out of the gate to anybody. If you haven't seen this movie, you should and you will like it. And that's Terminator 2. Terminator 2, it's just one of those movies that I can't imagine almost anybody being like, nah, that movie was not good. Like that movie sucked. That movie was boring. Doesn't seem possible to me. It's like nonstop action. There are so many incredible set pieces in that movie, like really iconic moments. The special effects hold up really, really well. Um, yeah, Arnold Schwarzenegger is fantastic. Edward Furlong is great in it. It's Sarah Connor is a great character, total badass, and Linda Hamilton. It's a great movie. Watch Terminator 2. It's the greatest action movie of all time. If you have an argument for what's better, um, and not one that you like more, but so here's the thing. Here is a thing that I'm going to say right now about these kinds of lists is that when I think of recommending something and or stating that it's the greatest of all time, that's with the idea that I think that as far as the law of averages is concerned, the most people would agree with that choice. Like the most people would say, if we did a poll right now, would Terminator 2 be voted the number one action movie of all time? I don't know that. That's my guess, though. And I think that's different than saying it's my favorite action movie or what is my favorite horror movie. Like my favorite versus what the best, I think are two separate things, if that makes any sense. Because my favorite could have sentimental reasons for why it's my favorite or some sort of like nostalgic reasons why it's my favorite or like really particular weird biased reasons why it's my favorite. But when I say something is the best, that's sort of keeping everybody else in mind. Okay. So Terminator 2, watch that. As a backup, if you've already seen that and you haven't seen this, then watch Aliens, the second Alien movie. Both of these directed by James Cameron, by the way. Aliens. What's fascinating about Aliens is that it took as a sequel to Alien, which was like a very sort of like quiet, eerie, creepy horror movie. It just said, well, what if there were like a lot of aliens and we had like jacked up Marines trying to go to war with them? And we just turned it into this sort of like steroid infused 80s macho action movie. And that's what Aliens is. That's why I think it's a great sequel. And it's also just like wildly entertaining. Not nonstop, like, you know, pulse pounding action the way that I remember Terminator 2 to be. I mean, Terminator 2 still has a great story and characters and character arcs and everything. That's why it's a great movie. But Aliens also has like uh, quieter moments to it. It's not just like killing the whole time, which is also why I think it's a great movie. All right, let's move on to horror. And I'll start with what a movie that I just mentioned, which is Alien, the first one directed by Ridley Scott. I think Alien is the best horror movie ever made. I think it holds up incredibly well. That's another thing that I want to say about all of the movies that I put on my list is that I think they all hold up really well. While it's super important when like ranking movies that you consider the context of when they came out, I don't think that matters for the movies that I'm mentioning. So when people say something is like a classic, sometimes it's because it was so influential, but the movies that it influenced are way better, if that makes sense. The movies on my list, I don't think that movies were better afterwards. Like these movies are so good that they're not only like seminal classics, but I also am not sure they were bested. Like, I think that they nailed it. These movies nailed what they were trying to do, and it's arguable that anybody did it better after them. And that's Alien is one of those for sure. It is incredibly claustrophobic. It is really nerve-wracking and tense, and Sigourney Weaver is really awesome in it. It's it's very quiet at times, which is really interesting. It's not like one of these, like, someone is constantly yammering, like, loud movies. It, 100% watch it in the dark, in the quiet. That's the best way to watch that movie. Years ago, I actually was able to go to a theater that was running Alien, and, oh, it was so good to see in the theater. Like, obviously, I never saw Alien in the movie theater. It came out in, like, 1979 or something like that. I was not born when the movie came out, so I never got to see it in the theater, and then I would say, I don't know, a decade ago or so, I had a chance to see it in the theater, and man, it was so freaking awesome. I do, also wanna say that I have seen it seems like, movie theaters are finding it profitable to bring back, older movies for, like, limited runs, and that is something that I would highly recommend and consider. Like, it's very, very like, watching Alien in a theater was way different than watching it at home. So, if you do get an opportunity where you live in an area in which there's a theater that's playing old movies, I would imagine that the tickets for those old movies, like, aren't very expensive, and it is a different experience and can be a much better experience to watch them in the theater, so I would recommend that if you can. My, backup to Alien is The Shining. Now, The Shining is the Kubrick movie I would probably first recommend to people. If I were doing a Stanley Kubrick recommendation list, I'm pretty sure I would start with The Shining. I think it's the most approachable of his movies. I'm trying to think, am I wrong here? Is there something else? I don't think that I'm wrong. I think this is like the most sort of standard a lot of people have watched you know, and enjoy The Shining. It's again, the visuals of The Shining are so memorable, they're so unique. The tone of the film is really, really unique. It has a creep factor to it that is really different than I think a lot of other movies. So, The Shining is my backup, or it could be number 1. I mean, Alien and The Shining, both really, really, really good choices for classic horror films that are just as good or better, I would say better than, anything made in the last 40 years if we're going by how old those movies are at this point. All right, trilogy. My number 1 recommendation for trilogies is The Lord of the Rings. If you haven't seen that, you have to watch it. Again, those movies hold up incredibly well. They, everything about them, the acting, the casting, the costumes, the set pieces of those movies, the story, the freaking story is just one of the greatest stories of all time, flat out. And that's my highest recommendation for a trilogy to watch. The backup for that would be the original Star Wars trilogy. I just don't know what it's like to watch that in 2026. After all of the Star Wars stuff that's come out since, a lot of which has been really putrid, eh, I don't know what it means to watch the original Star Wars. This is what I was trying to, articulate earlier, where, like, the freaking original Star Wars trilogy, like, in the context of movies, like, watching those back in the day, absolutely amazing. Just there was nothing like it. Complete and utter, like, mayhem as far as people's love for those first 3 movies. I mean, I know that, a lot of people didn't really like the 3rd one very much, I guess because of the Ewoks, but as, like, a 5-year-old, man, that was my favorite one when I was when I was very little. I loved Return of the Jedi. So, anyway, also, uh, George Lucas then went back in and added some, like, weird CG for some reason. I don't even know if you can watch the actual original or their actual original trilogy without his meddling available anywhere? I don't know the answer to that. Maybe I'm sure if you go on eBay and, like, buy them on VHS or perhaps, like, the first DVD print run, you can watch it without seeing Han Solo poke Jabba the Hutt, but, I'm getting sidetracked here. That would be my backup with is the original Star Wars trilogy with the asterisks that I have no idea at all what it's like to watch those now. Whereas with The Lord of the Rings, I don't think there's a tremendous difference. between watching them when they first, other than seeing in the theater. Let me tell you, watching Lord of the Rings in the theater was amazing, amazing, amazing. So again, if that's something that's happening near you, 100% go see those movies in an actual theater. But overall, I don't feel as though like anything is tainting that experience, 20 years later or whatever. Star Wars, I don't know. I don't know. All right. The next thing on my list, my categories kind of make no sense. My next category is just Coen Brothers. I'm a very, very, very big fan of the Coen Brothers films. I do not think that people who are just getting into movies really know anything about the Coen Brothers or their movies. They probably haven't even seen any of them. They made a lot of movies, and most of them are really, really good. Several of them are really, really great, which is super rare. The Coen Brothers movies that I have on here that I wrote down first, the first one I wrote down that I would recommend is Fargo. And the reason that I would recommend Fargo is that I feel that it would be more generally liked and enjoyed by most people. Okay. The second one I would recommend, even though it is their best movie, is No Country for Old Men. No Country for Old Men for sure is the best Coen Brothers film. They won the Academy Award for that movie, I believe, if I remember correctly. But to really enjoy that movie, you have to watch it while thinking about like themes and symbols. A lot of the juice to squeeze out of No Country for Old Men comes from the symbolism. And that's like, further down the line, in my opinion, of like getting into movies is to start thinking about them symbolically or even thematically. I think we need to start with just sit down, press play. Am I entertained the whole time? And at the end of it, I'm like, I liked that. I think that's a better place to start. And I think Fargo is a better place to start with the Coen brothers as far as that type of movie. Why do I like the Coen brothers? Because their characters are extremely um, memorable and idiosyncratic, and quirky is like a kind of lousy word to use, but I think it fits. They just do an unbelievable job of writing characters who are just a little bit weird. Like everyone in every single one of their movies is a little weird for some reason. The way that they talk, the way that they dress, the things that they're worried about, all of it has like a little bit of a strange patina to it that I really, really like. So you're not going to get ugh, one of the things, one of the major things I hate about so many modern movies is that the characters are so dull and interchangeable that, virtually anyone could speak the dialogue that they speak and you wouldn't know the difference. They're just like mouthpieces for the screenplay rather than feeling like living, breathing characters. The Coen brothers are the polar opposite of that. Like every single character in every single one of their movies is their own person. And it's really rare that, I can't think of too many places where you can find like that level of detail when it comes to like side characters, background characters, supporting characters, that sort of thing. This is what I love about the Coen brothers. So your gateway there is Fargo. I'll mention another Coen brothers in a different list or a different category later. All right, I probably need to start going faster. Everyone likes this movie is my own is I just this is a category I just made up. This category is everyone likes this movie. Okay, and I have two movies that everyone likes. The first is The Shawshank Redemption. Everyone likes that movie. If you watch that movie, you will like that movie. Okay? I don't see how it's possible to not like The Shawshank Redemption. If you do not like that movie and you're not just being contrarian for the sake of it, then please explain why. Because The Shawshank Redemption is a everyone likes this movie. The second one is The Godfather, the first Godfather. This is an old movie, okay? When did this come out? 60s? The Godfather. 72. Okay. '72. This is an old movie. This movie probably came out before your parents were born, all right? However, everyone likes this movie. I've never heard of anyone who didn't like The Godfather. It is just one of those movies that's really flawless. You sit down, you watch The Godfather. Do not look at your phone, okay? Oh, I should have, I should have started this list with some rules, but maybe there's just one rule. Put your phone in the other room and watch these movies, okay? I mentioned in the last podcast that someone on Twitter was complaining about showing them their roommates a movie. They were on their phone the whole time, and at the end, they were like, "I didn't like that." And then they quizzed them as to what the movie was about, and they had no idea. Well, of course you didn't like it. You weren't paying attention. Okay, pay attention to all the movies on my list because they're all good. I'm not giving you anything lousy or things that I just like and maybe you'll hate. These are all really, really great movies. You'll like it. Okay, so that's my rule. Do not look at your phone. Pay attention to the movie and you will like it. Shawshank Redemption and The Godfather are two movies where the best way I could describe either of them is by saying everyone likes these movies. Everyone. Okay, next on my list is epic. So epic movies, how long is the second movie? Maybe the second movie's not even that long that I put on here. Let me see. Yeah, it's not even that long. All right. Well, anyway, I don't know how to categorize this, but here are two more movies that I think are great. One is Braveheart. Braveheart with Mel Gibson is a Scottish revolutionary movie. uh, this was a huge, huge, huge movie when it came out, but I don't see that many people talk about Braveheart anymore, and I'm not really sure why. If anybody has a theory as to why it has sort of been forgotten, I would like to know. Maybe just because people don't like Mel Gibson anymore because he's kind of a weirdo. Maybe that's it. Maybe it's just like a personal vendetta against Mel Gibson, so people don't want to praise his movies. That's possible. But Braveheart is absolutely fantastic. The setting, the music, the story, all of it, the way that the whole thing builds and unfolds, and it's absolutely fantastic. Another one that's really great is Master and Commander. This is like a naval movie, so I think this is the only naval movie on my list. But yeah, Master and Commander, really, really great movie. Russell Crowe, and yeah, he's the master and the commander of the ship, and has to do with camaraderie and blah blah blah. It's a really good movie. You like Master and Commander. The next, so those are my epic movies. Master and Commander is not really epic. Braveheart is epic. It's a 3-hour movie. Master and Commander is just epic to me, I guess, in tone. Maybe that's why I put it under epic. Tarantino. This is its own category now. Tarantino. So Quentin Tarantino movies. The place I would start might be surprising to you. The place I would start with Tarantino is actually where he started his first film, Reservoir Dogs. I find Reservoir Dogs to be the most rewatchable. So this is getting into like personal bias territory, I suppose, maybe. But I think Reservoir Dogs is his most rewatchable movie. The dialogue is just so sharp. The dialogue in Reservoir Dogs is just razor sharp. It'll slice you and dice you in half with how quick and quippy and fascinating this movie is that takes place like basically all in one location. It's the Reservoir Dogs is like a play, more or less. I mean, it could just be a play. The whole thing is just like in this warehouse, basically, with there's a bank robbery. They're gonna, steal some diamonds. I think they're gonna rob a jewelry store, and then things go sideways, and the whole movie is trying to figure out what happened. The reason I'm picking this is because I just think it's a great movie that you don't like that anybody would like. I think it's like his most anybody should like this movie. It's not very long either. Some of his movies maybe could drag a little bit. Reservoir Dogs does not drag at all. It's very tight and it's just really it's really different. It's different than most movies. So I think it's worth watching just for that. The If you've already seen Reservoir Dogs and you haven't seen Pulp Fiction is, that movie was just very, very different when it first came out. There was nothing really like Pulp Fiction. A lot of things have been influenced by it since then. It has like a non-linear storytelling aspect to it that's interesting. But will everybody like Pulp Fiction? I have no idea. I have no idea. That's one of those, again, one of those movies that like maybe you had to be alive in 1994 to like understand how captivating Pulp Fiction was. And maybe in 2026, it's like less groundbreaking and therefore not as interesting of a movie. I don't know. I would be interested to hear anybody's opinion on that who has like watched it recently and, didn't grow up having seen it when it first came out. My next category is Stallone. Stallone gets his own category, and my favorite Stallone, and again, is another movie I really don't think anybody would not like. It's First Blood. When we first started recording, that was another film that got brought up, I think by Chin Collector, who loved it, who loved First Blood. And I was like, yes, of course you love First Blood. Why? It's great. It's just great. There's nothing not to like about First Blood. Again, it's a short movie. It's not a huge time commitment for you. The screenplay, I have my own little personal thing I say about the First Blood screenplay, in which I think it is a perfect screenplay and could be used in like screenplay teaching class to teach people how to write screenplays, how to write good screenplays, how to, do things like show, don't tell, how to give the backstory of a character organically as like the plot is still progressing and moving forward with forward momentum. All of these little things, First Blood does just astonishingly well. It's such a lean screenplay, but it does so much. Like literally, I'm telling you, the first scene of First Blood gives you so much information. It's insane. It is crazy. Like the economy of information in that first scene of First Blood, telling you like who Stallone is, where he came from, what he's looking to do, what his goal is, and what his challenges are. Like everything is explained in one conversation between Stallone and a widow who's like hanging her laundry on a clothesline. You get like this entire backstory. It's just brilliantly done. It's brilliantly done. And it's the kind of thing that I will lavish praise upon because I don't think other people will. Because what Rambo became after First Blood was very much the poster child for like brainless meathead action movies, which I also like. No, which I also love. Love those movies. But they're very different than First Blood, which is where it all started. Like very, 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 very different. First Blood is a really thoughtful and wonderful film. So that's my number one, Stallone. Number two would be Rocky, the original Rocky. It won the Academy Award for a reason. It's another film that just like I didn't put it above First Blood because I am worried that some people would find Rocky a little slow, maybe. Since it's much more of a character study than like an action movie. But Rocky is, again, a movie. Put your phone in another room, sit down and watch Rocky. It's fantastic. All right, we have to move on. Oddball comedies. Here is where we're going back to the Coen brothers. The Big Lebowski is the greatest oddball comedy of all time. It is a world that is fascinating to enter, where every single character in The Big Lebowski is just utterly strange. Uh, Lebowski and his friends, Walter Sobchak. Walter Sobchak, played by John Goodman, is objectively one of the greatest characters in the history of film. Let's just leave it at that. Like, watch the Big Lebowski. It is a legendary comedy. Another one that I have that it's not nearly as legendary, but I put it on here because no one talks about it. And I don't really just want this list to be like the most famous movies of all time, the most obvious movies of all time, even though it does have to be that, is American Splendor. American Splendor is my backup for oddball comedies. This came out in 2003, and it stars Paul Giamatti as a underground comic book writer named Harvey Picar, who's a real guy. Like, this is it considered a biopic? I don't know. Maybe it's considered a biopic, but it's essentially about a real guy named Harvey Picar who drew these like weird comics, and he's just a strange guy surrounded by strange people. He does a really boring job, and it's a very, very, very funny and off kilter kind of movie that I really like a lot. And I never hear anybody talk about. All right. So, American Splendor. Go try to find that somewhere. I have no idea where you can find that movie. All right. My next category is Clint Eastwood because absolutely deserves his own category. Uh, Unforgiven would be that's my number one recommendation. I would start with Unforgiven, even though what's odd about Unforgiven is it was kind of his deconstruction of a Western. So that, the best way really to have experienced Unforgiven would be to have known what Westerns, like the evolution of the Western was like, from the, I don't know, 40s to the 50s to the 60s to the 70s to the 80s. And then by the time you get to like 1990, Unforgiven comes out, and it's really a response to the story of telling the Western story. The idealism and all of that stuff, good versus bad, and what it means to actually be in a gunfight. Like, that's largely what it's about. What is it actually like to be in a gunfight, to pull a trigger and to take a man's life? It's not glamorous. That's what The Unforgiven is about, and it's just fantastic. Yeah, I don't see not liking that movie. To go back a little bit, I would suggest Fistful of Dollars. I think a lot of people would probably recommend The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. I wouldn't start there. You know, I would start with A Fistful of Dollars. I think that's an easier to like movie straight out of the gate. Um, I don't know if I'm right about that or if I'm weird about that, but The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is like 3 hours long. First of all, it's a long movie. It's long for a Western. Fistful of Dollars is tighter. It's an hour and 39 minutes. Some lore behind A Fistful of Dollars that's interesting is that that movie was stolen from Akira Kurosawa, his film Yojimbo, to like plagiarized to the point where Sergio Leone was sued over it. They settled out of court, but it's a really simple plot. It's not weird. It's very straightforward, and it's really good. You get some of the morality of the Old West, which is like really what's interesting about Westerns is the morality. And like there's like clear cut morality in that movie where, a drifter comes into a town that's at war and, he has to choose a side. And it's a very, very, very good movie. So that would be my like older Clint Eastwood recommendation. That came out in 1966. So we're going backwards there. Next, I get to mention Kurosawa again. So my next category is Japanese film. This I originally put under epic, and then I moved it into a Japanese category. But this is actually my favorite epic film of all time, and that is Seven Samurai, directed by Akira Kurosawa. My warning here is that it is in black and white. So if you're like, I cannot watch a movie that's in black and white, okay, then watch a whole bunch of other movies that are in color first. And when you're ready to sit down and watch something that's in black and white, I recommend these two movies because actually I think they are both in black and white. Seven Samurai is an amazing epic film. How long is it? Let me see how long this is. It's definitely over 3 hours. Let's see. It's almost 3.5 hours. It's a long movie, but as far as I'm concerned, it goes by quickly, and you really need every one of those minutes to tell the full story of these, Ronin who sort of get roped into defending this town of farmers who are going to be, wiped out. And the movie is a lot about like honor because it's a Japanese film. So that's like priority number one with a lot of their movies is like honor, duty, doing what's right, sticking to your code, like all of those things. Anyway, Seven Samurai is great. I don't want to say, but this is another movie like Fistful of Dollars was a ripoff of Yojimbo. Uh, the Magnificent Seven was like the Western with, six shooters version of Seven Samurai. So yeah, like Kurosawa was insanely influential in the West. A lot of directors just watched his movies and then they made like a Western, uh, sometimes literally like Old West, or just generally a Western version. And I should also mention the Hidden Fortress was a huge influence on the original Star Wars. So you can go down your own Kurosawa rabbit hole and just spend like a month watching Kurosawa films. There are so many amazing ones, but my recommendation would be Seven Samurai. The other Japanese film is Harakiri. Harakiri is just unbelievably good. I don't hear it mentioned. I don't hear anybody talk about Harakiri. I mean, it came out in 1962. Again, it's like all about honor and tradition. It's about a Ronin who is going to commit seppuku in the manor of the feudal lord. But before he does that, he tells his story as to why he's doing it. Like, here's why, he's going to do this in front of everybody, in front of all these other Ronin, what led him to this. So that's really like what the movie is about, is like he's there, he's going to commit seppuku, but he's telling his tale as to like what led him to this. Oh my gosh, this movie, if you have not seen Harakiri, you're interested in Japanese film, you're interested in Japan or Japanese storytelling, and you can deal with sitting through a black and white movie from 1962, put Harakiri at the top of your list. It was directed by Masaki Kobayashi. So look for that. That's my second Japanese film recommendation. If I were to give you, I'm just thinking of this off the top of my head because I gave you two old ones. Battle Royale would be like a more recent one. Battle Royale is an absolutely phenomenal, violent movie that I think the Hunger Games ripped off. I'm not sure. I don't actually know that. The idea is remarkably similar. Battle Royale, look for that movie. It's incredibly entertaining. My next category is 1999 core, which is a category I just invented. And the two movies in 1999 core are The Matrix and Fight Club. Both of those movies just really influential. They were huge at the time. I had heard recently someone say that they watched The Matrix for the first time and they didn't like it, which I found really interesting. It might be a movie that was amazing at the time and is really less amazing now. That's totally possible that it doesn't really hold up. But at the time, it was incredible for sure. So I don't know, your mileage may vary on that. I'm not as confident that you will definitely love The Matrix, but it's definitely a movie that you probably should see at some point in your life. Fight Club, I think that you'll like that no matter what. I think that's less, there's less of a risk there. I'm not really sure why someone wouldn't like Fight Club. It's a really unique aesthetic and vibe and a pretty interesting plot as well. And, it was made at a weird time where, people were like rebelling against the mundanity of everyday sort of white collar existence. I've read some really interesting things recently about how like quaint and ridiculous it is now that people were complaining about like having a cushy job, a cushy career, with a retirement plan and all of that. And that, they were going crazy having that. And now, people are begging for that sort of complacency and comfort and predictability. Anyway, Uh, no standard comedy. I wanted to throw because I did oddball comedy, and then I thought to myself, it's weird to recommend oddball comedy and not just like a straight couple of comedies. So, a straight couple of comedies that I think probably hold up really well are, but I could be wrong about this, but I'm going to throw them out anyway. One is Office Space, which was directed by Mike Judge. This is a movie that again was kind of sort of it was in that same exact uh class of film where someone had this like boring existence working in a cubicle and they, had to find meaning in their life. That's really again what Office Space is, similarly to Fight Club. The Matrix starts that way too. All three of these movies are about people who work in cubicles. So that's really interesting. But I think there was a lot of great jokes in Office Space that probably hold up, I think. So I'm going to throw Office Space out there. And the other one is Dumb and Dumber, I which is more of a farce. Office Space is less of a farce. Dumb and Dumber is for sure farce. It was done by the Farrelly brothers, I believe, and they were like the kings of farce for a while. Um, Kingpin is another one that they did about an Amish bowler. They did some very strange, very funny, over the top, like super over the top. Kinda like they did some gross out humor, that sort of thing. Um, I'm guessing that Dumb and Dumber holds up. I don't know. It's Jim Carrey, it's Jeff Daniels. Um, it was so unbelievably funny at the time. I'm interested to know if people still find it funny. One thing, little side story I have about Dumb and Dumber is that I went to high school with a kid who you could give him a time code and he would start Dumb and Dumber. He would start reciting Dumb and Dumber from the time code. So if you said like, hey, 1 hour, 7 minutes and 43 seconds, he would on the spot start reciting the film Dumb and Dumber from that spot, no matter what time you gave him. Like he had the entire movie not only memorized, but memorized by time code. So there's your Dumb and Dumber. There's Kevin's Dumb and Dumber story for the day. Um, okay, next up, I just called this good movies. These are just good movies. One is Primal Fear, which is with Richard Gere and Edward Norton. It's kind of a courtroom drama sort of film, but it is thrilling. Maybe these are thrillers instead of good movies. How about thrillers? Okay. Primal Fear, thriller. I don't see how you don't like this movie. I think that you'll like it. The other one is The Usual Suspects. This is another movie. The cast is incredible. I don't see how you don't like The Usual Suspects. Like that would just be very weird to me for someone to say, yeah, I didn't really like that. It was directed by Bryan Singer. It has Kevin Spacey, Benicio del Toro, Stephen Baldwin, Kevin Pollak. It's about the criminals. They're the usual suspects. They get brought in and interrogated. The cops are trying to solve this crime, and they go through how the crime was committed. It just it's just one of those movies. I'm going to tell you to watch, and you're going to like it. The Usual Suspects. Next up is my Scorsese. So Scorsese is hard. He's been around forever. He's famous now in the because of the Absolute Cinema meme. That's Martin Scorsese. He has a lot of very, very, very famous and popular films. The two that I would recommend are Goodfellas and Taxi Driver. Goodfellas is kind of the quintessential mob movie. I guess outside of The Godfather, you have to watch The Godfather, but I think that maybe Goodfellas has been. No, I'm sure The Godfather was way more influential. That's absurd to say. But Goodfellas was also very influential. It has a ton of really, really famous scenes that you might have seen like parodied elsewhere. And then you'll watch Goodfellas, you'll be like, oh, that was from Goodfellas. The opening shot of Goodfellas is really famous, and I absolutely love it. Um, it's a great movie. Taxi Driver also. Both of these movies I would say are likely more strange than you're going to imagine going in. These are two that Weezergood in the Discord has watched recently, and I think that was his feedback on both. He loved Taxi Driver, and then Goodfellas, he said it was weirder than he imagined. So I think that's something that's a feature, not a bug. But yeah, Taxi Driver is gosh, if you saw The Joker a few years ago, Joaquin Phoenix's Joker film, Todd Phillips's film, that was just basically Taxi Driver. So if you liked the Joker movie, you will like Taxi Driver, and you should see Taxi Driver since that's what that movie like almost completely aped. So watch both of those, and he has so many good other good ones after that. If you've already watched Goodfellas and Taxi Driver, Casino has a lot of really memorable, great scenes. Raging Bull, I really, really think is fantastic. Raging Bull is in black and white, but it is a great depiction of a boxer. It's about a boxer, and it's about his entire life. It's about his entire rise and fall. So of course, it stars Robert De Niro. Um, Jake LaMotta. It's a biographical sports drama about Jake LaMotta. It was a real guy, a real boxer. But Scorsese just does an amazing job in Raging Bull in showing where he started and where he ended up. And there are not a lot of movies. There are not a lot of movies that do it better than Raging Bull. Maybe there are no movies. Maybe there are no movies that do that type of story better than Raging Bull. Not that I can think of off the top of my head. Oh, I have a couple of more here. Westerns. So these are going to be, I was trying not to give you old movie recommendations, and now I'm giving you more old movie recommendations, but I'm sorry, too bad this is my list. The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance is a fantastic movie. It's one of the greatest movies of all time, and I think completely holds up today. I just don't think you won't like it. It stars John Wayne and Jimmy Stewart. Lee Marvin is in it. Lee Van Cleef is in it. Like the cast is, it was directed by John Ford, who's a legend. Like this movie is just like legend upon legend upon legend, and it is excellent. If you have not watched The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, watch that movie. Again, I'm giving you movies that you will like. You will like this movie, even if you have a hard time because it's old. It's fantastic. It holds up 100% cleanly. This one might veer into Kevin just really likes this movie territory, which is Once Upon a Time in the West. So I might be being a little bit of a contrarian and a brat about Sergio Leone in recommending like this over like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly again, which I mentioned earlier. But I like Once Upon a Time in the West better. I just like it better. I think it's a better movie. It stars Charles Bronson. Henry Fonda is in it. It has the music, the classic music by Ennio Morricone, which I probably am butchering all of these Italian names. Uh, it's so good. It is very long. It's almost 3 hours. So, you have to know that going in. But since this is my list and I get to say what I think is the best, I personally think Once Upon a Time in the West is the best Sergio Leone movie. I think it's the best one. But you might want to watch the Clint Eastwood ones first. Fistful of Dollars. I did already mentioned. Uh, Good, Bad, the Ugly. It's very, very famous. A Few Dollars More. I don't even remember that one. I think that for a few dollars more, I don't remember anything about that. I definitely watched it, but not in a long time. So I'm not going to say more about that. Anyway, Once Upon a Time in the West is underrated. It's extremely underrated. People don't talk about this movie. Go watch it. This is why you come. This is why you come to Kevin's Unc-Slop Sherpa podcast, is to find out about movies like Once Upon a Time in the West. Great movie. Should I do this one? I'll just do. Let me talk about this category for a second. So I made a category called Weird. Then I was going to call it surreal. And then I just didn't know what to do with it. It's hard to recommend weird or surreal movies when you're trying to make a list of movies that you know people will like, because sort of by default, a lot of people won't like them or else they wouldn't be weird. So, like, for example, I love David Lynch. I think that Twin Peaks The Return is like probably the most interesting piece of television that's ever been created. I didn't say the best, but I did say the most interesting. And I think that that's true. But when I was looking at his filmography and thinking, what David Lynch movie do I want to put on this list? The answer was none because I'm trying to adhere to like the initial goal of this list, which is movies everyone will like. Will everyone like Blue Velvet? Will everyone like Mulholland Drive? No. Will anyone but me and like 7 other people like Inland Empire? No. So Lynch is not on my list. What I did write down City of Lost Children because that came up recently. And I really wanted to just have some film on this list that I really love that you almost certainly haven't heard of. So maybe that's what this category is, and I'll just leave it at this. I'll just leave it at The City of Lost Children. It's an incredibly visually imaginative and beautiful film. It is French. It's a French film. It stars um, Ron Perlman from, Hellboy and Sons of Anarchy fame. And I don't know where you can find it. I don't oddly enough, they made a PS1 game based on this movie, which makes no sense at all. It's directed by Jean-Pierre Jeunet. Again, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but he also did Delicatessen, which is fantastic. And he also did Amelie, which I love. I've heard other people who hate Amelie. I don't really get that. Maybe they find it corny or something. I don't find it corny. I personally found it beautiful. Really like Amelie. But anyway, he also directed Alien Resurrection, which was like his attempt at breaking into Hollywood, and that did not go well at all. I don't blame him for that. I'm sure the studio was at fault, considering that there hasn't really been a good Alien movie like ever since the second one. I mean, debatable if there has been, but like, David Fincher fought with the studio over Alien 3, and that movie was really weird. And then Alien 4, which was Alien Resurrection, also really weird. Looked amazing though. I mean, if you want eye candy, then definitely, he has that in spades. But watch The City of Lost Children. It's really strange. It's about this like creepy old man stealing children's dreams. It is surreal, and probably nobody has recommended that movie to you before. So if you've seen everything that I've mentioned and you're a big movie buff and you never heard of City of Lost Children, then go watch that. All right, I'm ending my list. So I'm a little over an hour. Not too bad. I'm ending my list with 80s kids movies. So this is where we get into nostalgia bait for me, because these are movies that I grew up on. And there may be some corollary movie that came out in like 2007 that you grew up on or whatever that you would like as much. However, there are things in 80s kids movies that happened that will not happen again. Okay? There was a lot of puppeteering. There were a lot of huge beautiful sets, like real physical sets that were built and practical effects that were made. Just things that won't happen again. And it makes them really special. Like, aside from the fact that I was a kid in the 80s, like objectively now looking back, the those movies were made in such a way that like kind of happened once and won't happen again, because everything now is CG, everything is filmed on green screens, and uh, it all looks the same. But you can find movies in the 80s that like look really unique. The first one on my list is The Neverending Story. The Neverending Story is like the height of like child fantasy as far as I'm concerned. It's about a boy who is getting bullied and he retreats into this book about this warrior child named Atreyu, who's trying to save the land of Fantasia from the nothing. And the movie is filled with deep symbolism about like what imagination is, what creativity is, like what it is to have hopes and dreams, what escapism is. Like there's a lot going on in this movie, a lot more than just watching, a child movie on the surface level. Like you can get a lot out of it as an adult as far as its themes and its symbolism. Like what is the nothing? Why is it taking over Fantasia? All of this stuff. And I'm not saying it, takes a PhD to crack the code as far as what it's about. Um, but at the same time, it is just a lot more interesting to think about than your kind of your average kids movie. And and Jen in the Discord mentions plus emotional damage. Yeah. I mean, I don't know, it'll be interesting how emotionally damaged adults are seeing it for the first time, but as a kid, then yeah, there's one scene in particular that was heavily scarring of everyone. Every single millennial who exists was deeply scarred by one particular scene in that movie that you will know right away. I don't have to say it. I don't have to spoil it. You'll watch the movie and you'll know exactly what scene I'm talking about. So the never ending story. The other one I put on here was The Princess Bride. Uh, because and anybody in the episode chat disagree with me, maybe, but The Princess Bride just seems like another one of these movies that's like, how could you not like it? Like it's very, very whimsical. It's very silly. It doesn't take itself seriously. Like it has like in jokes within it, but then it also has things that are serious. The characters are really memorable, like very, very memorable. There are several scenes of The Princess Bride. I feel like you just remember forever. I don't know. I don't know if that's me being nostalgic about it and having watched it so much as a kid, but I don't know. I could be wrong about that. The way that, like the game of wits with Wallace Shawn. How do you not remember that scene with the poison cup for the rest of your life? Um, I think it will hold up. I think you would like The Princess Bride to this day. And it's actually another movie where it's like a movie within a movie, sort of. This kid is sick and he wants his grandpa to tell him a story, and the story that he tells him is The Princess Bride. Um, Whereas in the Never Ending Story, it's about a kid who steals this sort of magical book. His name is Bastian, and he reads the book, and what he's reading is the movie. Um, Macadandi in the episode chat mentioned Labyrinth. Labyrinth I love, but it is not on my list because of it's really like a musical. There are a lot of musical numbers in Labyrinth, and I have no idea how many people will like the songs. Yeah, that's why I didn't put it in here. But, if you're interested, if you like David Bowie, you're okay with some songs, then absolutely, Labyrinth is a great movie. Has some great Muppets in it, some phenomenal sets in that movie. Um, Another one that it was my favorite movie for most of my life that I didn't put on my list because I don't know how well it holds up is The Goonies. One thing I thought of just now when I was thinking about how you'll never see movies made like they were made in the 80s again has to do with the Goonies, because as far as I know, and this maybe this was beaten at some point in subsequent years, but at least for a long time, and it might still be the case, that the pirate ship set in the movie The Goonies was the largest physical set that was ever built for a movie. Ever. Ever in the history of Hollywood. There's a set at the end of The Goonies that is a pirate ship, and it's like in a cove. So it's like surrounded by water, and it's in a, it's like in a cave within a cove. and it's this giant pirate ship, and they built the whole thing. Like, they literally built this pirate ship in this watery cove physically. And as far as I know, unless there was some other movie at some point that beat it, it was the largest physical set that was ever constructed, which is really crazy and really cool. I just have no idea if that movie holds up, or if, because here's a weird thing that I found out when Stranger Things first came out was the amount of people asking if the kids, like, just leaving their parents and, like, riding their bikes around wherever they wanted was real. Like, if that was a real thing that kids would do in the 80s, they didn't believe it. Well, that's what The Goonies is all about. Like, that's where Stranger Things got that idea, was from The Goonies. The Goonies is about a group of kids who get on their bikes, they ride away in search of pirate treasure. I have no idea if, you know, younger people who didn't grow up or who don't even believe that that was a thing that could happen can relate to it in a way that us old millennials can. All right. Jen also mentioned in the episode chat Legend, which is another fantasy movie that came out in the 80s. It is not really a kid's movie. I mean, it's pretty dark. I mean, if it is a kid's movie, it's like a pretty mature kid's movie. It's a movie that I really, really love, but for some reason people hate. So that's why it's not on my list. I didn't put Legend on there, despite because that ends up in like Kevin loves this movie territory more than everyone will love this movie territory. One thing that I will say about Legend that I totally made up and is a complete conspiracy theory that has no basis in reality, and I just invented it in my head, is that I've always thought that The Legend of Zelda was based on the movie Legend. I mean, when did, so Legend came out in 1985. Legend of Zelda came out in what, 87? When did Legend of Zelda came out? 87. So it came out 2 years later. I don't know how long it was in development, but you watch Legend, the Ridley Scott movie, starring Tom Cruise, by the way, like a very young Tom Cruise. You tell me that The Legend of Zelda isn't like exactly the same. It's like exactly the same, like almost to the point of, the boss, like the final boss is like very similar. You have like a little fairy that, flies around. Link, who's Tom Cruise. Um, the way that he has to like get his armor and his sword and all of that stuff. I don't know. I'm sure it's just a coincidence. They're both probably based on something different that I am ignorant of, and I'm sure that that's the case. But while I, live in my own ignorance and I stay there and I'm comfortable there, I set up a hammock and I just lay down in my own ignorance hammock. I will stick to my guns with this legend movie influencing the Legend of Zelda game. All right, so that is your list. Your homework now is to just enjoy these movies. This is not homework. You do have to, like I said earlier, not look at your phone while you watch them. Please just pay attention and enjoy them. And if there are uh, movies that are on your list that you think everyone would like, again, I want to recontextualize the idea of this list is to recommend movies to people who don't watch movies, think that they don't like old movies, but are willing to try. Like they're willing to dip their toe. Like, okay, boomer, I will give this a shot and you better be right about this. This is my list of, I think that I'm right about this. I don't think there's anything that I mentioned today that you will not like. If you don't, then and you were paying attention and you still don't like it, then that's okay. I'm open to that. I'm open to being wrong. Let me know what it was that didn't click for you. And if there are other movies that I missed that you would recommend to other people, I really would love to see more of an open exchange of information on this topic because, as we have learned, this is a zombie art. So, if anyone is actually interested in perusing zombie art, then they need an Unc-Slop Sherpa. I'm one of them. There are many, many, many others. Join our Discord and exchange ideas. Maybe there are people your age who have a better idea of if any of this stuff holds up than I do, and that would actually be really, really useful for you to contribute that. So anyway, all right. Have a wonderful week. I'm out of here. If you want to support the podcast, you can do that on Patreon. And otherwise, we will see you, Space Cowboys.
Thanks for listening to The Create Unknown. We make this show with the support of our patrons. 100% of that goes directly to keeping episodes going every week. And the recent support has been amazing. Sidpoke, NRM, Venture Addicts, Weezer Good, you all really do make this show happen. Thank you to the Tots and the Dumpster crew, old and new, who save tiny little lives every month. And thank you to our grizzled, battle-hardened child infantry. Clemente de los Santos, Dan the Latch, Demetrius Andrews, Erica, Ferrycoon, Jen Mafasanti, Kevin Menard, Mikhail Steinke, Monahem, Natsu, Penny Piddler, Ryan Steer, Ryan Kinder, Samuel Manser, Sean S., Sean Malone, and Tom Bidiover. And a tremendous shout-out to our elite baby gang commanders. Atrocious Scuff, Kat, Dojangles, Graham Robertson, James Gallagher, Jeff Davis, Orange Vanilla Coke, Patrick Pister, TCU's personal pilot, Andy, Ryan Carroll, Baseweight Vinthos, Yeetus Deletus, Jonas Walter, Nathan Robinson, and of course, Trev's dad. You are the elite. Thank you as well to our indentured servants, producer, editor Ben Webster, Minecraft mogul Laterman, Discord kitten wrangler Conrad, and producer emeritus Dan Yosua. Thanks to Baseweight for use of Created in the Unknown for the opening theme. Thanks to Electro Voice for giving us mics to sound good on top of it, and thanks to Main Gear for powering all our PC endeavors. The Create Unknown is an Unknown Media production in partnership with Studio 71.